Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking something pretty incredible. The brilliant architectural structure of Reverend Thomas Hawkins' sermon, "The Answer is Blowing in the Wind." We're going to look at exactly how he builds this beautifully complex, layered metaphor, connecting the literal, physical wind that we feel every day to the theological concept of the Holy Spirit. It's just a fascinating look at how structured metaphors can totally bridge the gap between the physical world and the spiritual one. So let's break it down together.
Right out of the gate, Hawkins hits us with this incredibly evocative question: who has seen the wind? It's a brilliant move, really, because it instantly establishes his whole central theme. From the very first sentence, he's setting up this juxtaposition between invisible forces and their highly visible effects. We absolutely know it's there. We know it's incredibly powerful, but we can't actually see it.
And to really hammer this concept home early on, he brings in a classic. He quotes Christina Rossetti's famous poem, "Neither I nor you, but when the leaves hang trembling, the wind is passing through." By dropping this in, the sermon effectively grounds us in this universally understood childhood observation, right? Before layering on any heavy, complex theological concepts. He gets everyone nodding along to a shared physical reality. We literally see and feel the effects of the wind, even if the wind itself stays completely invisible.
Okay, moving right along to phase one, the physical realm.
To explain the divine, Hawkins first roots us in physical reality. And I mean, he goes big. He points out the sheer scale of the Earth's atmosphere stretching 11 miles above us. Just think about that for a second. 11 miles of wind, forming literally the most powerful force on Earth. It's constantly churning, entirely driven by temperature variations and the actual rotation of the planet itself. You've got cold Arctic winds clashing with warm Gulf streams to create these massive tornadoes. It's basically a gigantic, ceaseless physical engine that runs around the clock.
And he takes this a step further. Citing Lyle Watson's book, Heaven's Breath, Hawkins frames the wind as the Earth's circulatory system. So it's not just moving air, right? It's literally the nervous system of our planet, moving vital information and energy. Without it, the Earth just wouldn't be habitable. The tropics would literally boil over, and the rest of the planet would freeze completely solid. The wind is what distributes that energy to make life on this planet even possible.
And this invisible system leaves highly visible proof. Picture this: winds sweeping up dirt and air particles all the way from the Sahara Desert in Africa and carrying them entirely across the ocean to the coast of Massachusetts. The unseen force of the wind is what actually produces those stunning, highly visible orange and red sunsets miles and miles away. We get to see the breathtaking effect, totally blind to the cause.
All right, that brings us to phase two, the linguistic and historical realm. So here, we explore how ancient people translated this massive natural phenomenon into their understanding of the divine. Consider the Hebrew word ruach. It's this incredibly layered word that translates simultaneously to wind, breath, and spirit. Hawkins points out that early desert-born Hebrews just inherently linked these concepts. They looked at the world around them and recognized that just as the invisible wind swept over the sand dunes could give life to the earth, our breath gives life to humanity. When the breath stopped, well, the spirit was gone. So to them, the wind, our breath, and God's spirit were all inextricably tied together in this single, powerful word, ruach.
Historically, this whole idea builds to a very specific timeline. Now, long before it was the Christian milestone we know today, Pentecost was originally a Jewish harvest festival. It occurred exactly 50 days after Passover and was rooted super deeply in the physical, agricultural cycles of the earth. It specifically marked the waving of the first sheaves of the grain harvest.
Hawkins then maps out the events of the Christian Pentecost from Acts chapter 2, and he does it chronologically. First, there's a sound like a violent wind. Second, divided tongues of fire appear. And third, believers start speaking in native languages. By mapping out the scriptural narrative step by step, the sermon intentionally mirrors the sudden, chaotic energy of that violent wind filling up the locked upper room. The exact same invisible ruach that animates the earth is now forcefully animating these dispirited disciples with entirely new energy and power.
And the result? A message spoken to an incredibly diverse group of nations. We're talking Parthians, Medes, Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judeans, Arabs. Hawkins points out that the author, Luke, included this specific list for a reason. He's showing intention. The message, carried by the breath of the Spirit and spoken in these native languages, was meant to scatter to the four winds of the known world. It was designed to travel all the way from Jerusalem to Rome, moving across the globe in the exact same way the wind moves pollen and heat.
Let's jump into Phase 3, the philosophical realm.
Hawkins elevates the metaphor here using a brilliant analogy from Niels Bohr. You know, the famous physicist and father of quantum mechanics. Bohr talked about this idea of the fish's reality. As a kid, he watched fish in a pond and realized, hey, they only perceive water ripples and the inner illumination of their own pool. They had absolutely no idea Bohr was sitting right there watching them, and no idea a sun even existed above the surface. Hawkins compares this directly to human reality. Just like those pond fish are oblivious to the world above the water, we humans live out our daily lives largely unaware of the invisible, divine forces acting upon us. We are shaped by it, exactly like a landscape is shaped by the wind, even when we can't see it at all.
Connecting the macro down to the micro, Hawkins asks us to literally take a deep breath. Seriously, think about this right now. If you were to spread out all the tiny alveoli in your lungs, they would cover a full sheet of newspaper. Our lungs are our biggest organ. So with every single breath of ruach, we are quite literally taking the big world inside of us and exhaling what is in us right back out into the world. It's a constant exchange.
Which finally brings us to our last turn, Phase 4, the actionable realm.
Hawkins doesn't just want to leave us floating in the clouds of theory. He challenges his audience directly. We cannot be a people who just blow hot and cold, because we are filled with this breath, this spirit. We're called to consistently embody the tangible, active energy of justice and love out in the real world. He tells them point blank that they cannot just sit still when people go hungry or when dignity is denied to some just to benefit others.
And this is where he anchors this massive cosmic metaphor to absolute concrete reality. He talks about donating children's books, gathering hair care products, supporting battered women. Hawkins actually points out the literal donation table sitting right there in the church breezeway. These everyday items, collected over just a few weeks, are the tangible proof. This right here is how everyday people make the invisible God visible. Because just as the blowing wind is proven by the trembling leaves, the invisible spirit is proven by these highly visible, everyday acts of charity, care, and justice.
Hawkins concludes his sermon with this beautiful old Appalachian folk hymn. The lone wild bird in lofty flight is still with thee, nor leaves thy sight. Great Spirit, come and rest in me. By ending on this note, Hawkins brings the soaring, global, 11-mile-high metaphor of the wind intimately back down to the individual. The vast spirit that crosses oceans and scatters across nations ultimately rests inside the single person.
So I want to leave you with this provocative thought. How will you make the invisible forces in your life visible today? Through this explainer, we've seen how effectively a tightly structured metaphor can transform a simple breeze into a really profound call to action. By weaving together everything from childhood poetry and atmospheric science to ancient Hebrew linguistics and quantum mechanics, Hawkins shows us that understanding the invisible demands highly visible action. Thank you so much for diving into this structured breakdown with me. I really hope it helps you look at the wind just a little bit differently today. Keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.